Hello everyone. It's such a pleasure to see you again on my channel. Today, we'll come together for a brand new story, the story of lythica and Officer Hung, a young couple who once moved so many hearts with their sincere love and unyielding determination amid the hardships of rural life. After a series of events, Hung was reassigned to a new workplace, more than 130 kilometers away from his home with Lythica. Since then, he's only been able to visit his wife and child during his short days off each week. Meanwhile, Lythica remains in their hometown, carrying all the burdens, taking care of little Tony, while also helping her adoptive mother, Miha, the kind woman who has always devoted her life to her daughter. The distance makes the longing grow deeper, and love is tested more than ever. At his new post, Hung stands out, calm, honest, and mature, the kind of man who naturally earns the quiet admiration of many of his female colleagues. But will Hung be able to stay faithful to the love he once vowed to protect? Will the 130 kilometers that separate them slowly fade the bond that he and Lythica have built over the years? Stay with me through this entire episode to find out what truly happens. Because every moment of this story carries emotions, challenges, and surprises you definitely won't want to miss. More than 130 kilometers away, deep in the mountains of a poor district, Hung stayed at the commune office, where he had been assigned to work for the past few months. The road from home to this place was rough and winding, crossing 3 mountain passes and several small streams. On rainy days, his motorbike would often get stuck in the slippery red dirt. Yet Hung never gave up, because he believed that even far from home, this job carried meaning, helping villagers learn to read and write, opening new paths for the children's future in these remote highlands. He was in charge of the literacy and cultural education program. Every day, he taught people how to read, to write, and told them stories about life in the lowlands. Each morning, he put on his old khaki jacket, carried a worn-out teaching bag, and walked along the misty red dirt road to class. The small school sat on the hillside, walls cracked with age, wooden desks rough and uneven, yet the air was filled with laughter. The children huddled by the charcoal stove, eyes sparkling as they looked up at the board, carefully spelling out each word he wrote. And Hung, in that simple setting, felt a strange warmth inside, as if all his fatigue quietly melted away. By late afternoon, when the sun dipped behind the mountains, he often stayed behind to help the elders practice their letters, then joined the villagers by the stream to fetch water, chatting in a mix of his hometown accent and the local dialect that he was slowly getting used to. At night, in his small rented room, he prepared lessons under the dim light of a kerosene lamp, the sound of insects echoing outside the window. The room was barely 10 square meters, walls stained with patches of lime, a small wooden table, a wash basin, and a few clothes hanging neatly on a wire. In the corner sat an old suitcase, holding only a few notebooks, some medicine, and a framed photo of Lythica and little Tony, placed carefully on top. Every time he looked at that photo, it was as if they were smiling at him, as if he could still hear Lythica's gentle voice whispering, "Remember to eat well, don't stay up too late." Tony would cry if he knew you were sick. Each time those words echoed in his mind, his heart ached. The mountain nights were cold and damp, fog creeping through the cracks of the window, moisture covering the walls. Some nights, Hung would sit by the window, staring at the pale moon above the ridge, listening to a dog bark in the distance, then open his phone to reread his wife's old message. "Tony, and I miss you." Just a few simple words, yet to him, they were the greatest source of strength through the lonely days away from home. At dawn, when roosters crowed across the valley, Hung put on his jacket and stepped out onto the porch. Mist blanketed the path, the chill slipped down his collar, making him shiver. The wind rustled through the acacia forest, mingling with the murmur of a stream below, the quiet symphony of the mountains. He stood still, gazing at the thatched roofs faintly visible through the haze, and wondered. Has Hoài Ca woken up yet? Is Tony still sleeping in her arms? He took out his phone, the faint screen light flickering as he scrolled through a few old family photos. Tony's cheerful smile, Hoài Ca's gentle eyes, all of it felt like a balm easing the loneliness in his heart. He sipped a bit of hot black coffee, its steam rising into the cool morning air, blending with the mist. A faint smile appeared on his lips, a smile carrying both the pride of a man devoted to his duty and the deep, endless longing for the family waiting for him back home. One day, the school welcomed a new teacher, Mai, who had just been assigned from the provincial center. She was young, soft-spoken, with eyes that carried the bright eagerness of someone fresh out of college. Mai had long hair neatly tied back, often wore a simple white blouse and a brown skirt. Her warm smile and open-hearted nature seemed to fill the small mountain school with newfound light and warmth. They first met during a teacher training session. While Hung was crouched down, fixing a broken speaker wire, Mai walked over and gently said, "Let me help you. It must be tiring doing that alone." Her voice was as soft as the mountain breeze, her eyes kind, and her hands careful as she held the wire for him to reconnect. At that moment, Hung simply smiled and thanked her, thinking nothing more of it, yet when she walked away, the faint scent of grapefruit blossoms from her hair lingered in the air. From that day on, they often worked together, attending village meetings, visiting families to encourage children to attend school, or trekking long distances over red dirt hills and across small streams after the rain. Mai usually walked beside him, her shoes splattered with mud, yet she always smiled, sometimes glancing over to say, "Officer Hung, I really admire you. You're so far from home, the work is hard, but you're always smiling." He just smiled faintly and replied, "It's work, you get used to it after a while." Time passed, and their closeness grew naturally, quietly. At noon, Mai would sometimes bring him a small lunchbox, maybe fried rice with eggs, or just boiled sweet potatoes and a cup of hot ginger tea. "I made this for you. The weather's cold, you might catch a chill." Hung accepted it with a nod and a quiet thank you, feeling a brief warmth in his chest. At first, he thought she was simply being kind, a colleague showing care in a place where everyone relied on one another. But soon, he began to notice something different in her eyes each time she looked at him. A tenderness, a quiet warmth, and a hint of shyness whenever their eyes met. Sometimes, in the silence of the windswept acacia forest, Hung felt a stir in his heart, not because of her, but because of fear. Fear that this fragile emotion might hurt the woman waiting for him back home. That night, when he returned to his small rented room, Hung placed the box of tea Mai had given him on the table. The yellow lamplight fell softly on the photo of Hoài Ca and Tony at the head of his bed. He stared at it for a long moment, then exhaled slowly, as if reminding himself that there are lines one must never cross, not even in thought. Late one night, just as class ended, a sudden downpour swept in. The wind howled through the cracks of the wooden door, blending with the rhythmic drumming of rain against the old tin roof. Darkness filled the small classroom, broken only by the flickering glow of a kerosene lamp reflecting off the damp floor tiles. Hung bent down to tidy the desks, gathering a few rain-soaked notebooks, about to turn off the light when the door creaked open. Mai stepped in, holding a pale purple raincoat, her voice trembling slightly in the cold wind. "Officer Hung, you forgot your raincoat. It's pouring outside, please wear it or you'll get drenched." He looked up, surprised. Through the curtain of rain outside the doorway, her slender figure stood there, hair clinging to her cheeks, raindrops glistening on her eyelashes. He smiled faintly, his voice deep and warm. "Thank you, but I'm used to it. It rains here all the time." Mai didn't reply right away. She just stood there, looking at him. The lamplight caught her eyes, eyes filled with quiet sadness and compassion. Then, softly but clearly, she said, "Officer Hung, I know you have a wife and child back home. But, seeing you working so hard all alone like this, I can't help but feel sorry for you." Her words hung in the air, mingling with the sound of rain, and for a moment, Hung froze. He put the broom down, silent for several seconds. Thunder rumbled somewhere in the distance, the rain pounded harder on the roof, echoing through the small room. When he turned to look at Mai, her face was flushed, her expression caught between sincerity and unease. His voice grew hoarse. "Mai, don't say that. I respect you, truly. But please, don't make things harder for both of us. I have a family." Mai lowered her head, her fingers tightening around the edge of her soaked raincoat. Her voice faded, trembling slightly. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I just couldn't hold it back. I know you're a good man, and I admire that." She set the raincoat on the table and turned to leave quickly. The door closed softly behind her. The wind rushed in through the cracks, carrying the earthy scent of wet soil, a hint of wild forest flowers, and a sharp, aching chill that pierced his chest. Hung stood still. The rain kept falling, heavy and relentless, beating against the tin roof, and against his heart. He sat down at the table, his eyes resting on the pale purple raincoat still dripping water. His thoughts drifted far away, to the image of Hoài Ca, standing under the porch back home, her hands picking vegetables, her gentle voice calling Tony to dinner, her warm smile lighting up their small house. He sighed softly and reached for the framed photo by his bed. His fingers lingered on Hoài Ca's face in the picture, warm, tender, yet impossibly distant. Outside, the rain still hadn't stopped. That night, the cold was biting. Rain kept falling outside the porch, each drop heavy, dragging along the breath of the silent mountains. From afar came the faint hum of insects, blending with the wind that swept across the tin roof, howling in long, broken waves. Inside the small room, Hung's shadow stretched across the wall, wavering with the dim yellow light of the desk lamp. He opened his laptop, trying to finish the unfinished report. But the words on the screen began to blur, then fade, dissolving into nothing. His hand froze. The cursor blinked softly, like the rhythm of a heart unsteady within his chest. He let out a quiet sigh, leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the thick curtain of rain outside the window. And then he murmured, almost to himself, "You know what you're doing, Hung." His voice was hoarse, lost in the rain, sounding like a reminder, weary yet resolute. In that moment, memories came flooding back. He remembered that morning, the day Hoài Ca refused to move closer to his new post. She had sat on the steps, her eyes gazing into the distant fields heavy with ripened rice. Her voice trembled but remained firm. "I want to stay. My mother is here, my father's grave is here, even the old gourd vine he planted is still growing." Hung had stayed silent then. He understood, it wasn't stubbornness, but love. The kind of quiet devotion that tied a woman's heart to her roots. He smiled faintly, a sad yet tender smile. Now, in this cold mountain room, he understood more deeply than ever that some promises aren't just about building a home or putting up a roof, but about keeping one's heart pure, even through distance, loneliness, and the silent tests that come from afar. The lamp's glow fell across his face, dark circles under his eyes from sleepless nights, sunburned skin roughened by long days of work. There was fatigue there, yes, but also something else, resolve. He quietly closed the laptop, then looked up at the small framed photo by his bed. The light caught Hoài Ca's smile in the picture, soft and gentle, and for a moment, his heart eased. Outside, the rain still hadn't stopped. The cold wind whispered through the cracks of the window, like the voice of the night itself, long, deep, and full of quiet unrest. The next morning, mist still blanketed the hills. The whole mountain seemed draped in a thin, gauzy veil, with cool moisture drifting gently in the breeze. Birdsong echoed from deep in the forest, mingling with the soft murmur of the small stream behind the office. The sun lingered shyly behind the ridge, its pale rays filtering through the fog, painting the landscape in soft, fading strokes, like an ink-wash painting come to life. Hung stepped into the yard early. He wore his old jacket, dewdrops glistening on his shoulders, and held a chalkboard announcement he had rewritten that morning. He hammered a nail, hung the board in front of the small classroom, and looked up at the misty, silvery sky. The damp scent of soil and faint smoke from burning straw drifted in from a nearby village, a familiar fragrance that suddenly felt heavy in his chest. He hadn't slept the night before. The rain had fallen endlessly, heavy and steady, like the weight in his heart. The image of Mai standing in the classroom, her trembling voice, her teary eyes, it wouldn't leave his mind. He knew she hadn't meant harm, but her words had stirred something uneasy inside him. Footsteps sounded softly behind him. He turned around. Mai stood there, wearing a thin beige sweater, her hair tied back, a few strands clinging damply to her cheeks. In her hands was a stack of notebooks, their corners beaded with drops of dew. Her voice was gentle, almost blending with the morning mist. "Officer Hung. I'm sorry for what I said last night. I shouldn't have put you in that position." Hung stood silent for a few seconds. The breeze rustled the edge of his coat. He looked at her, calm, steady, but with depth in his gaze. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the slow dripping of dew from the roof, steady as the beating of his heart. His voice, low and firm, finally broke the quiet. "Mai, I know you're a good person. I respect you, for your sincerity and your warmth. But I already have a family, Hoài Ca, and my little boy waiting for me back home. I don't ever want to do anything that would hurt her, or make me regret who I am." Mai lowered her head, her shoulders trembling slightly. She gripped the notebooks tighter, her fingers wet and cold with dew. After a long pause, she looked up. Her eyes shimmered with a mix of sadness, regret, and something deeper, something unspoken. Then she smiled, a soft, almost fragile smile, her voice quiet but clear. "I understand. I just wish you happiness, no matter who it's with." The words drifted through the air like a passing breeze, yet to Hung, they landed heavy as stone. He frowned slightly, meeting her eyes, but they no longer looked as clear as they had the night before. Between them, the mist seemed to thicken, turning the short distance into an endless expanse. Hung said nothing more. He only nodded gently, then turned to leave, his footsteps crunching softly over the damp gravel. Behind him, Mai stood motionless. The morning wind brushed against her sweater, loosening a few strands of hair that framed her face. In her eyes, the pale light of dawn reflected, a faint shimmer, uncertain, caught somewhere between letting go and the quiet beginning of something unnamed. As Hung's figure faded into the mist, she stayed there, watching for a long while. Her smile slowly faded, her eyes lowered, and a stillness fell over the mountains, heavy, tender, and full of the countless words left unsaid. From that day on, Mai changed completely. She no longer acted friendly or tried to strike up small talk like before. Instead, she became quiet, calmer, more reserved, yet somehow, she was always there exactly when Hung needed someone. No words, no obvious gestures, just small, thoughtful actions so subtle that most people would never notice they were intentional. Each morning when Hung arrived at the office, a cup of hot black coffee was already waiting on his desk, steam curling upward, its soft aroma filling the room. On rainy days, a neatly folded raincoat hung by his door, pale purple, the same color as the one she had worn that night. When he forgot to eat lunch, a small lunchbox would appear on his table, wrapped carefully in a floral cloth, with a tiny packet of salt and pepper and a few slices of lime inside. No one ever said anything, but everyone knew it was Mai. She rarely spoke, just did things quietly. Her kindness was like a gentle breeze, silent, unobtrusive, asking for nothing in return, yet it crept deeply into the heart of the man who lived far from his wife, weary amidst the cold mountains. Sometimes, Hung told himself it was only compassion, simple goodwill. But on lonely nights, when he saw the steaming cup of coffee still on his desk, a strange, restless feeling would rise within him, faint, uncertain, but undeniable. Work grew busier. Meetings in the villages often lasted late into the night. Hung usually came back after dark, his office light still on, and sometimes, outside the window, Mai would still be there, sorting through papers, pretending to be busy so she could stay a little longer. The lamplight reflected off the glass, casting her profile in soft yellow tones, gentle, serene, yet carrying something unreadable beneath the surface. Meanwhile, back home, Hoài Ca was still living her quiet, hard-working life. Every morning, she took Tony to his special class, then came home to care for Miha, whose joints ached more each day. At noon, she hurried to finish harvesting the last patch of rice, and by evening, she was teaching Tony to speak. Life pulled her along, hour by hour, day by day. The calls between husband and wife gradually grew shorter. At first, they used to talk for a long time, about work, their child, the neighbors, small things. But over time, those calls dwindled into a few hurried exchanges. Have you gone to bed yet? Did Tony eat well? Come home soon, okay? Then silence, the long, hollow tone that lingered after the call ended. One night, Hoài Ca called, but no one answered. She sat by the window, listening to the soft patter of rain on the roof, a strange emptiness growing in her chest. She told herself, he's probably just in a meeting. But that tiny flicker of unease stayed, like a fine thread slowly tightening around her heart. Meanwhile, Mai sat by her own window in her small rented room. The dim yellow light from her lamp glowed against the damp curtain as rain whispered outside. She touched the cup of ginger tea beside her, steam still rising, and murmured softly to herself, her voice trembling but determined. I don't want to take anyone's place. But I'll make him see who truly cares for him the most. The night wind blew through the crack in her window, rustling the papers on her desk. And in her eyes, there was something both tender and dangerous. A kind of love that made no noise, yet grew quietly, stubbornly, like a root sprouting deep beneath the wet soil after rain. Distance doesn't only test one's steps. It tests the heart. In the remote mountains, where fog cloaks the winding passes, Hung is facing his greatest challenge. Not the hardship of work, nor the weight of poverty, but the quiet turmoil within his own heart. On the other side of the phone screen is Hoài Ca, the devoted wife who still waits for him every night. With a cold meal on the table and the soft voice of their child calling, Daddy. Yet far away in these misty hills, there is another woman, Mai, who keeps caring for him in small, gentle ways. Enough to stir emotions he thought were firmly bound. Will Hung keep the promise he once made to Hoài Ca? The promise that, no matter how far I go, my heart will always find its way home? Or will he lose himself in the fragile pull of a distant affection, where loneliness makes even the strongest hearts falter? And Mai, the girl who seemed so kind, so genuine, will she stop at admiration? Or will she step deeper into the storm of emotions, trying to claim Hung's heart for herself? The answer will come in the next episode. when faith is tested, and a new storm begins to form, threatening to wash away everything that Hùng and Hoài Ca once built together. A storm, not of weather, but of the human heart.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người, lại là mình đây. Mình cũng rất là vui vì cứ mỗi lần ở cuối video thì mình cũng có thể chia sẻ một ít câu chuyện của mình đến với mọi người. Đó là thì hiện tại mình đang xây dựng những kênh YouTube như thế này thì nó thuộc là dạng giống như là review lại những câu chuyện. Tại vì mọi người cũng có thể thấy là những video như LyTuDiep các thứ là chủ yếu là nói tiếng Việt và mọi người xem thì nó khá khó khăn, nên là mình sẽ làm lại nội dung review bằng tiếng Anh để mọi người có thể xem dễ hơn cũng như hiểu được nội dung của câu chuyện. Ngoài nội dung chính của câu chuyện thì mình còn phát triển thêm ngoại truyện nữa để mọi người có thể xem hay và hiểu rõ hơn. Cảm ơn mọi người rất là nhiều, mong rằng sẽ tiếp tục nhận được sự ủng hộ của mọi người trong những video sau. Tạm biệt mọi người. Mọi người ơi, yêu quý kênh mình thì nhớ ấn đăng ký kênh, sau đó là bật chuông thông báo lên để không bỏ lỡ bất kỳ video nào mọi người nhé.